G'day and welcome back to another Origin Showcase video. In today's video, I've got the Kinji Hakari Origin from Jujutsu Kaisen, created by the Discord user known as Shrumple. This is a 3-impact Origin that I'm going to brutally get the names wrong on multiple occasions, and I'm just going to say up front, I apologize for that. This Origin is for Minecraft version 1.20.2. Will also require the extra Origin keybinds mod, as well as Pachinko, which will also help with sizing. Let's get into the abilities. The first ability is a big one, Domain Expansion Idle Gamble. This is an active ability that you activate by using your primary ability key, which is bind to G by default. Upon activation, every entity within a 15 blocks radius of you will be brought into your domain expansion. Entities caught by the domain will have their mind forcefully flooded with information being the rules of the domain, stunning them for a short period of time. The environment constructed by this domain resembles an underground train station aligned with Pachinko slot machines. After a brief wait, the domain will begin rolling. The goal of this domain is to roll 3 of the same numbers in a row. On the first roll is a 30% chance of this happening, a 45% chance on the second roll, 55% chance on the third roll, and with the fourth roll is a pity roll, which guarantees a jackpot. After the additional roll, the domain will roll every 10 seconds. The longer the domain lasts, the longer the cooldown on it will be. If 2 of the same numbers are rolled in a row, then a reach action will play. A reach action is basically a cutscene that has a good and a bad outcome, which signifies if your next roll will result in a jackpot. Whenever the user lands a jackpot, they will effectively be immortal for the following 41 seconds. When the user re-expands their domain after a jackpot, they have a 75% chance to go into an increased probability round and a 25% chance to go into a time reduction round. The spin chances on the increased probability round are 50, 65%, and 80%. The time reduction round reduces the total player spin time. If the player ends up on a pity during the time reduction round, will be sent back to a normal round. This does not happen with the increased probability round. The user will also be sent back to a normal round upon re-expanding if they died during their domain last use. Upon hitting the jackpot, the domain closes and you are guaranteed infinite regeneration and other buffs for exactly 41 seconds. Now, that was a lot of information for the Origin here, so for the next little bit, I'm going to have it mostly be visual. You'll see what exactly happens here, whilst I give you some brief information. Now, first off, the green bar that is above your hotbar is the bar for your domain expansion. This, of course, by default, won't actually be fully charged, so you can't use it immediately when you jump into your first survival world with it. You'll have to wait for it to charge up for the first time, which will take about 30-ish seconds or so, give or take about a minute. You'll get there eventually, and you can use it for the first time. When you do, you get some beautiful sound effects as long as you're using the texture pack for this Origin, and you'll be shifted into a new dimension where, well, you have the Pachinko machines. They don't exactly function, it's more just text visualized on the screen to represent what's actually happening. And luckily enough, in this initial recording here, I got one of the reach points, the react points, and we got a roulette wheel which signified that the next thing was going to be a jackpot, and which we also got that too. When you get a jackpot, you'll be sent back to the overworld with all the various different buffs for around 41 seconds, as well as a banging track to go along with your win for the next 41 seconds. And it's quite funky and quite interesting. But there's also 2 other variations. Fortunately here, we got the jackpot in the previous one, so we're going to go into the better variation. With my next use of this ability, we got the time reduction round, which we got for the very first slot machine, an immediate reaction point where we got another roulette reel where it landed on red again, so we got an immediate jackpot right afterwards, which gave us a fair amount more buffs than the previous time round. Again, everything else is much the same. You get the banging soundtrack to represent your jackpot, etc., etc. Time for one last round, and this time we get the increased probability round. We get another reach very quickly, which this time round indicates a guy trying to get to the trains on time, but unfortunately the gates close on him, meaning that you fail this roll. We then immediately get another reach round where it's counting down whether the trams are going to be on time or not. Again, if they're not on time, represents a fail. If they're on time, represents an immediate jackpot. They made it on time, and we got another immediate jackpot. Again, the same buffs as the first time round, and everything else is much the same. I'm going to assume that there is countless different variations of the reach probability thing, and it's honestly a really cool system that gives you some form of indication of what's going to happen next, and just a nice bit of spice and variation to this very, very funky mechanic. Shutter doors. This is your secondary ability. Upon activation, you spawn in shutter doors 2 blocks in front of you. These shutter doors then slam into each other, causing anything caught in them to be damaged. When you use this ability, it will spawn 2 doors in front of you that are on a horizontal plane and will slam close immediately, encasing whatever's there. And it does a lot of damage. This also has a pretty significant cooldown of roughly about 30 to 60 seconds. It's a pretty long cooldown. It does do a lot of damage though, being able to take out an Iron Golem and a very minimal amount of hits. I think it was about 6-ish hits with the shutter doors, as well as anything that survives the shutter door damage will also be left with some form of temporarily damaging over time effect for the next little bit, which can also kill the mob if it has low enough health to be killed by it. Pachinko Swarm, an activated ability using the load bar key, which is usually X by default. Upon activation, you fire out a swarm of Pachinko balls. This swarm can be 3 possible colors, green, red, and gold. The color of the Pachinko balls represents how much damage the skill will do, with green doing the least, gold doing the most. There is a 60% chance for the swarm to be green, 30% chance for the swarm to be red, and a 10% chance of the swarm to be gold. A green swarm of Pachinko balls does 4 hearts of damage, red does 6, and gold does 8. Anyone who is hit from the swarm will also be momentarily concussed, stunning them for a brief period of time. This ability I feel like I don't need to explain too much here. It's got a decently long cooldown as well, very similar to the Shutter Doors one, and whenever you press X or whatever your load toolbar activated key is, it will shoot some Shuko things at the Pachinko balls towards whatever you're looking at this current point in time. It's kind of useful. It does do a pretty bit of damage, as well as the remaining damage effect can kill whatever mob it is that was hit by these Pachinkos, but I don't know, it's another quirky ability that's really cool. Pseudo Spin, this is on your save toolbar key, which is C by default unless you have some form of zoom mod, then you might have to retool that. Upon activation, you will randomly roll a multiplier. Depending on how large the multiplier is, you heal back some of your health to negate an instance of damage. 1 times heals 4 hearts, 60% chance, 2 times heals 6 hearts, 30% chance, and 3 times heals 8 hearts, 10% chance. This skill is only usable during your domain. You heard that correctly, you can only ever use this ability whilst you're in your domain section, which requires you to have that on cooldown, and let's be real, so far with my experience with this origin, odds are you usually get a jackpot most of the time, so ultimately that ability kind of feels a bit useless? I don't know, I'm not 100% sure on that one. It's a cool ability, I like, again, the gambling nature of it, but beyond that, it is just, I don't know, a bit useless. Dynamic Entry. This is bound to your Tenary key. Upon activation, you imbue yourself with curse energy to boost yourself towards where you're looking. If you launch into the sky and fall from at least 5 blocks high, then upon landing, you'll cause an explosion and a surge of curse energy, destroying blocks and damaging mobs/players in a 6-block radius of you. This ability, like pretty much every other ability in this origin, does have a reasonably long cooldown of around 30-ish seconds, but this one's very interesting. If you do it whilst looking directly in the air, you'll go basically nowhere, so don't ever do that. It's honestly really just a nice small propulsion forward that gives you an additional bonus if you do fall for more than 5 blocks with the ability, which will only really happen whenever you're launching yourself off a cliff, which gives you some pretty fun interactions of just falling down, exploding wherever you land, and not taking as much fall damage as if you would if you just fell that distance normally. I don't know, it's a very intriguing ability. Again, I don't know how particularly useful this is going to be considering how long of a cooldown it is, but again, it's really cool. Fever Meter. This meter represents your domain cooldown. To activate your domain, this meter has to be full. Upon activating your domain, you consume half of this meter. Every failed roll inside of your domain will consume more. This meter fills up passively, but can also be filled up by dealing damage with your preview performance skills, shutters, pachinkos, and swarms. Activating the Pseudo Spin will also fill up this meter. This is where that health ability from earlier actually does come somewhat useful, because it does give you a little boost in the domain ability in your fever meter, which again is that green bar that I mentioned at the start of this video when we explained the first ability. Whilst I was messing around with the domain here in this section here, I think I completely broke it a little bit. First off, I went into the domain thing, went out after winning a jackpot. Before the jackpot finished off, I was already back into the domain thing, which kind of led it to froze on the final digit of the roll until the point where my domain charged up to full again, which is when I used it again. Now, I don't know if it was this that broke the next bit that happened, or me flicking into spectator mode just to observe what this world looks like. Either way, when I was teleported back to the overworld, I was about 50,000 blocks away from spawn. I don't know, that was funny as hell. This is just such a quirky origin, I love it. Cursed Energy trait. Your cursed energy has a unique trait with it being extremely rough. It is described as being hit by a serrated metal bar. Because of its unique properties, all of your hits apply a bleeding effect for a short period, and all your skills also apply a bleeding effect. This is that red sparkly effect that you would have seen on the previous mobs that I've done damage to with the abilities. I went in more depth about that ability existing with the shutter doors, but hey, here's a proper explanation to it. On a roll, if you hit a jackpot on your first roll after you've already hit a jackpot, then you will be going to a buffed/boosted jackpot mode. Instead of speed and resistant ones, you'll get speed and resistant 2, and you'll have the added effects of jump boost 2 and infinite saturation. I'll reference back to the footage I used in the start when we talked about the domain expansion, because I did get that lucky with the next jackpot and got the boosted effects, which is really cool. Hindrance, you prioritize speed over defense, and therefore you sacrifice all forms of worn armor so you can be quick. You can't wear any armor, including elytras. Pretty self-explanatory, there's not much more to it. Brawler, you're a close quarters styled fighter using hand-to-hand combat and your techniques, therefore you cannot use any weapons. Again, pretty self-explanatory here, but I'll probably go a little more detail here for you. The basic way they've gone about this is whenever you're holding a weapon of sorts, you'll be applied with an infinite-esque weakness, which will immediately remove itself the moment you're using something else because the weakness has a literal 1-second cooldown. But with this weakness, you can't do any damage with any weapons, which includes a sword, an axe, a trident. You can't use shields, you can't use bows, you can't use crossbows, and you can't use the right-click ability of the trident either. Don't worry though, you can still use the axe as a tool, same with a shovel and a pickaxe, which again is pretty neat. And that is the Kinji Hakari origin. What are your thoughts on it? Let me know in the comments down below, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to click this video on screen here now for more origin shenanigans. But until next time guys, bye bye!